means they're
Introducing the Region President, Greater Philadelphia, Delaware Region of Wells Fargo, Mr. Greg Redden.
Well, good morning, everybody. I hope that you are enjoying today these thoughtful and thought-provoking conversations that have been occurring all morning here. At Wells Fargo, we think that meaningful conversations lead to great ideas, collaboration, and exploring what's possible in our city and our communities, and that's why we were really excited to be a sponsor of the event today. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Dr. Hite, and I've known Dr. Hite for a little over a year now. And last spring, I led a group of about 1,000 Wells Fargo volunteers to transform the McDaniel Elementary Schools in Point Breeze, along with an early learning center and a community center. We built those 2 playgrounds, we painted classrooms and inspired murals for the walls, put in new furniture, and made about 800 backpacks. Now, this was a very interesting time at the school, and the district was heading into an even more challenging school year. So Dr. Hite had a lot on his plate, but he made time to be there for us. And he took time to tour the schools, he took time to interact with the students, and to thank our team members for being there. Recently, when Wells Fargo took part in Philadelphia's campaign for reading on grade level, Read by Fourth, Dr. Hite was there as well, pledging the full support and cooperation of the school district in this very, very important initiative. You'll find Dr. Hite in the boardrooms and in the classrooms with teachers, parents, and students. Sometimes you'll find him in Harrisburg or also in front of the Philadelphia City Council. He'll go anywhere he can to obtain the resources critically needed by our school district. He's earned a lot of credibility among our critical stakeholders and the students, parents, and teachers, and has really garnered support on both sides of the aisle politically and is highly respected in the business community. He's very dedicated and committed to the success of Philadelphia's school children, and I believe he is the absolute right leader for the issues facing the city's school districts. So please join me in welcoming to the stage our Superintendent of Schools and my friend, Dr. Hite.
The editor of Philadelphia Magazine, Patrick Kirksta.
Dr. Hite, thanks for this. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Did you think it would be this hard?
Yeah, I mean, I had a colleague who came in from Oakland, and he and I had done some work early on, and he said, I've been reading about you, and he said, you know, it's like you are chasing a whale with a spear. And so it is, yes, I thought it was going to be this hard, and I think it's all for the right reasons, and the right reasons are to provide children in this city with a high-quality education. And still, people are still very passionate about this issue. And no matter what the topic is, a lot of individuals come out to talk about it if, in fact, it relates to education. So, yeah, it's difficult. We understood it would be difficult, but more importantly, we understand why it's so critically important to get this right for every single child who's receiving a public education in the city.
One of the things that I think is striking about what you're doing is in the midst of this ongoing crisis, and yet a lot of work has been done looking ahead on where you want to take the district. You have an action plan. It's a very ambitious plan. Action plans usually are, and we've seen past action plans that are ambitious. What makes yours different, and what needs to change within the district culturally, structurally, setting aside the dollar question for a moment? What else needs to change in order to get there?
Yeah, so we're going to set aside the dollar question, I mean, because that's a big point, a big piece of it. But in addition to that, I mean, as I think about the action plan, it is, and I've read some of the previous plans and really talked about that, but the distinction is we're looking at those practices that are based in evidence. These are things that are happening and can happen in schools that will make differences for children. And we have a metric for each one of those things so that we can measure our progress towards that as we move forward. So the primary distinction, in my opinion, is that it's not on a whole series of inputs. So we're adding this thing, or you're doing this thing, or you're putting in this new program, but instead looking at those things that are based in evidence to make a difference with the populations that we serve.
You've replaced something like 90 principals over the last 2 years in district-run schools. I'd like to hear a little bit about why you feel that sort of turnover is important, and maybe more importantly, what a couple of those principals are doing that is encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, and it's been a few more than 90. And the reason I know that is because I interview every one of them and understand. And over the past 2 years, naturally, the district has been struggling through a lot of things. And so individuals have left for various reasons. Some, they were ready to retire. Others were afraid that the contract negotiations at the time with the administrators would impact some of their termination pay. And so individuals left as a result of many different reasons, and we lost some good people. But in addition to that, though, it provides us with a real opportunity to look at individuals who are buying into our mission and vision of schools. Mission and vision for focusing on instruction, the needs of students, creating the environments in schools that are conducive to student learning, providing time for teachers to come together and be reflective about their practice. So we're really looking at individuals who can do that. And this is not just about a skill. This is not just about who is next in line. And so we've really changed the process for how we're selecting these individuals. But instead, we're looking at individuals with a certain skills and abilities in order to meet the needs of students, and individuals who have expectations for all of the children that they educate. And it can't be all but children who are learning English, or all but children who have special needs, or all but children who are coming out of circumstances of poverty. It has to be the same expectations for every single child. And that's what we're looking for in the new leaders who are coming in to lead these schools. And so we've seen quite a few innovations, and I'll use two examples. One example is Dana Jenkins. Dana Jenkins is a principal at Roxborough High School. At Roxborough High School, Dana is requiring all of her seniors to apply to at least 5 colleges. And she's helping the children with the resources to do that. In addition to that, she's provided time for her teachers to come together and really talk about their practice, analyze student data, and really she's created an environment where teachers have a significant voice in what's happening at Roxborough. In addition to that, she is a model school for something called restorative practices. And restorative practices is looking at the environments that are associated with a learning environment being more conducive to children learning. So that's one example. Another example is Kim Newman. And Kim Newman is at Chester Arthur. And at Chester Arthur, Kim is looking for ways to do inquiry-based learning in the school. As a matter of fact, she is partnering that school with Science Leadership Academy, and they're looking at some of the same learning activities for elementary children.
What does inquiry-based mean? What is that?
Inquiry-based means that it is that children start not so much with a set of content to memorize, but instead it really focuses on learning. So it gives children the opportunity to problem solve, to think critically. They're trying to answer a question, and they're trying to answer a question by being exposed to information, and then they talk about that information. They present their solution based on the evidence that they've looked for or looked through. And so that's one of the things that's really important. So you will see not so much get through this page to this page in a chapter, but instead, here is the problem we're attempting to solve. And there is a lot of learning and understanding through that process. And one thing that's critically important, and you will hear this from SLA and from other schools like the Workshop School, there is as much learning that happens when children are not successful or that they try something and it doesn't work as it is when they master it. And so there's learning in failure, if you will, because they tried to solve a problem, understand why that did not work, and then they're able to apply that to other places. And so we're really excited about what Kim is doing at Chester Arthur. Those are two examples of new principals who are taking on innovative approach and thinking differently about what their schools look like.
I think one of the things that puzzles folks who aren't in the education world is you've got something that's working at one school, why can't you replicate it? Why can't you copy and paste what's happening at Chester Arthur and implement it district-wide or over a broader array of schools?
Yeah, I mean, the perspective there is, I mean, that theory works if all schools were educating all of the same children from all of the same places and from all of the same neighborhoods with all of the same challenges or opportunities. The fact is that's not the case. And so individuals are looking to be responsive to the needs of the learner. And the needs of the learner could be very different based on where those individuals live or where they're coming from in the city. We heard from a young lady last night who was a rising star from Roxborough, Miss McMinn. And she was a student who has been in multiple different locations. She talked about the fact that she had been in homeless shelters, but now, because of the opportunities that she has received and the support that she has received through teachers at Roxborough, through the staff at Roxborough, now she's planning to apply to Penn, to Drexel, to Yale, and to all other places because she is the top child in her class. But it is really looking at how do we become responsive to the learner. So what may work in one place or with one group of children may not work in a different place simply because the issues that individuals are facing in those places are very different.
Do you think we'll see then more differentiation between the schools as you go forward here, the different approaches at different schools?
No question about it. We almost have to. I mean, and if we're serious about this approach that there is not a one-size-fits-all model, then yes, it has to be. And if we're talking about it being responsive to the learner, many children will learn differently, and they're children with dyslexia that need different supports than children who do not have it. They're children who learn visually or children who are auditory learners. And so you have to have multiple opportunities and multiple approaches for those individuals to be engaged, to be challenged, and the information must be relevant and meaningful for those students. And so project-based learning, inquiry-based learning provides for those types of experiences.
I think it's fair to say that certainly some teachers are pretty demoralized right now with the contract issues, with the district's incredible financial problems, with the lack of resources. How do you recruit and retain top talent in that environment, and how do you ensure that the teachers that are here are focused and engaged and not understandably worried about all that surrounds them?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and the young lady told a story last night when the student at Roxborough, and she told a story about one of her teachers who was offered a job at a private school where he could have taken his 2 children to be educated for free. But instead, he stayed at Roxborough simply because of the children that he had formed relationships with. And she talked about how critically important that was for her success. And so that is representative of what all of our teachers are doing across the district. And the teachers that are doing that type of work, and they feel like their success and their motivation is very much local. And what we're trying to, and what I mean by that is it's very much school-based. And so one of the things that we've heard from teachers, even leaving the system, is that they want to be acknowledged. They want to have an opportunity to grow their practice. They want to get meaningful and relevant feedback. They want to have opportunities to talk with their colleagues. And so one of the things that we're doing is back to this leadership point. We are hiring leaders and the types of leaders that teachers want to work for. And we're trying our best as a district then to get out of their way so that we're not doing anything that then creates a problem for that. And so part of the motivation here, or part of the encouragement, is to get better individuals who are recognizing what teachers need in terms of their professional practice and what they need socially and emotionally. And then as a district, also trying to get the revenue we need in order to pay them a lot more and to acknowledge those individuals who are doing tremendous work inside of classrooms.
I think there's a fear that given the financial crisis that the district is standing still. And I know that not to be the case in at least some areas, and one of those is school violence. There's been incredibly impressive reductions in school violence over the last year at a time when There's far fewer adults in most school buildings. And I wonder if you can tell us how you've done that.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, so number one, to answer your first point, we're not standing still. And the reason we can't stand still is because children are in their schools every day. And the children never get this year back. And so whatever the year is, third grade, fifth grade, 11th grade, they don't get a do-over on that, or mulligan, at a golf term. So they don't get to do that again. And so it's critically important for us to do everything that is within our control. And so it's a reason why we looked at new high school models, and new high school models that are more personalized based on the needs of the learner. Why? Because many of our children who are selecting or not selecting high schools and then are confined to their neighborhood high schools are indicating to us, both verbally and through their actions, that these high schools are not responsive to them. They're not relevant, they're not engaging. So we really have to look at what's happening with the experience of these children in high schools. In addition, though, we're focusing not just on the issue or the input, we're also focusing on the root causes of many of these things. So we have implemented programs like positive behavior intervention, like restorative practices, like conflict resolution. We have trained individuals to recognize trauma. And all of these things have allowed us to begin changing the environments in schools. And those environment changes then are leading us to having fewer incidents, serious incidents, fewer arrests, and fewer suspensions. And here's one thing that I know. I mean, and regardless of where we are, we could create schools that are police states. But here's what I know. Number one, we can't arrest or suspend our way to higher achievement. You teach your way to that. Children learn in order to do that. And so you have to set it up so that we're responsive to what many of our children need. But in addition to that, we are making their experience more relevant, more respectful, and more engaging, so that they feel like it is something that is motivational and encouraging to them.
Mm-hmm. Are there models in other cities, districts that are doing it well in similarly challenged circumstances that you're borrowing ideas from and that you might be able to tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of models. The challenge is the similarly challenging circumstances. I mean, is not many, unfortunately, that are facing some of the critical challenges that we're facing, at least around revenue. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of innovation across the country, and the work that is going on in Washington, D.C. around teacher voice, and the work that teachers are doing to improve their practice. What's happening in Denver, Colorado, when individuals are looking across sector. They're looking at, they are coordinating with the charter school sector, they're coordinating with the Catholic school sector, and they're really sharing best practices in order to improve outcomes for children. Looking at how do we focus on new design models that are engaging for students, a lot like what has happened in New York and Chicago and other places. How do we begin to implement opportunities for children to experience science, technology, and mathematics and engineering at the early grades? And so how do we get that, and how do we begin that in grades as early as kindergarten, first grade, so that children build into a place where they are exploring and they are answering questions and they are analyzing and researching. And so those are some models that we've seen in other places that could help us, that we've looked at here and are starting to implement some of those things here in Philadelphia.
The education reform movement has done a great job of creating urgency around the need to do things differently in schools, and yet it's often criticized, and perhaps appropriately so, for being a bit reckless, for maybe breaking a few eggs along the way. And I guess I'm wondering, how do you introduce change and shepherd change through a district that needs it, without breaking the eggs? I mean, the eggs are the students, right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the eggs are not always the students. And the most fragile of our eggs are the students. You're absolutely right. And many are broken already. And many are broken by things that, in some cases, we do for adults in the system and not focusing on children. And so part of this is, number one, understanding what should happen for children who've been underserved year after year after year, and understanding that we cannot continue the status quo for those children. We have to have different approaches to their learning. The environments must be different. How they learn is even different. In addition to that, and the other part of that, I'm using the analogy of the egg now. So considering the students as the egg, but if we consider everything else as the egg, I mean, in some cases, the egg must be broken. If we're not considering the student as the egg, but if we're considering it, if we're considering it like by the system, like the system is the egg, you want to move gradually through the system.
We get the asterisk.
You got it. Yeah, gotcha. So, but in some places, we need to absolutely break that, because it is not working for children. And then when you talk about children who are coming from circumstances of poverty or minority children, it's working less. And so part of that is, like, if we're going to be honest about this, then let's focus on what those children, I mean, what we have to do in order to engage those learners, and really begin to think out of the box. And as a matter of fact, should do like many teachers do in their classrooms, what I've started to do, and just ask. So just ask the students. And if you just ask them, they'll tell you what works well for them or what doesn't. And we have too many places now that is not working well for them. And they're very honest and forthright about that.
Let's project ahead here. 5 years, let's say for a moment that the resource issue has been addressed. Maybe we're not rolling in it, but we're doing okay. And we've got an assessment system that we're applying both to charters and to district schools. Is there one sector or the other that you think is doing better? I mean, do you think that in the long run we're going to be a district-run school majority city, or will we be a charter majority city?
Yeah, that's hard to forecast. I mean, here's what I want. I mean, if I think about it in the long run, I just want children and families to have a high-quality choice for where their children are being educated. I've always been agnostic about sector and what that means for them. Now, there are cost implications to that causes me not to be as agnostic as I was before. So there are cost considerations that we must take into account. But to your point, I mean, number one, I want Philadelphians to choose the school district. And if we look down 5 years, what that means is I want to be the choice of families in Philadelphia, no question about it. I want public education to be the choice for families in Philadelphia, which means we're going to continue our focus on things that matter, like literacy. We're going to continue our focus on creating safe and supportive environments. We're going to continue our focus around innovation and around STEM, so that our children have the opportunities that that engage and stimulate them and that are relevant. And so if we're thinking about 5 years down the road, and I like that thought. I like that thought. Money is not a problem. And if we're thinking about that, I'm thinking about just a few things that would help us do that. Regardless of where a child attends school, being exposed to the best teacher. Regardless of where a child attends school, having the resources that they need, if in fact that child wants an AP class or an art class. Regardless of where a child lives in the city, having access to technology. Regardless of where a child lives, having access to individuals who are actually going to ask, how are you doing today? I'm glad you're here. And so those are the types of things that I want to see in the district 5 years from now. And I think that if in fact we can accomplish that, and we're working towards those things now, then we will become the choice of families.
Now, about the money, and we'll keep it brief because people know the situation, I think, by and large. But you will hear folks say, we've been pouring money at Philadelphia schools forever, and it's not worked, so we're done. What do you say to those people, and what do you say to the folks who perhaps rightly, wrongly believe that the money is being wasted?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, and you know, this is, I was at an event like a couple of weeks ago, and someone said, it was Knight, actually, Knight Shyamalan. I think he's going to speak here later, and so I'm quoting him. And he said, you know, he said, I'm gonna share a dirty little secret. America's racist. He said that. I mean, and that was his term. And I thought about that, and I think about this question all the time, and every time I hear it. And so, and every time I hear it, I think about the fact that no one questions the fact that Lower Merion spends so much money. And no one actually suggested they should spend less. But when we talk about children in Philadelphia, it is you're wasting it. And if we're talking about who we're educating, then it makes me think about Night Shyamalan's statement. There's no other instrumentation of the Commonwealth that has done what we've done to get our arms around spending. There's no one else that spends less on administration. There's no one else that has reduced its workforce by the amount that we've reduced. There's no one else that has eliminated the programs and closed the number of facilities that we've closed, not even on a percentage basis. And so we're trying to address waste. We're trying to operate more transparently. And the fact is, we still need more money to educate our children. But let's be fair. I mean, and let's be fair and equitable. And if in fact individuals are going to talk about waste in Philadelphia, let's talk about waste everywhere else. Or if individuals are going to say, you know, we don't want to give any more money to Philadelphia, but we're going to hold harmless all of these other districts who are getting so much more per student. So let's just be fair in that conversation. And if they're going to apply that to Philadelphia, let's apply it everywhere else. And I'm not suggesting that, but I'm suggesting that just raise that revenue. And then we don't have to have this conversation about waste and all of those other things. It's not suggesting that there hasn't been waste in the system before, but we're addressing that issue. But it's interesting when we talk about what it takes to educate a child in Philadelphia. It says you don't need any more because it's waste, but then we don't talk about the systems that spend almost $10,000 more than us per child, saying, well, they should actually come down to what Philadelphia spends because they must be wasting money if it's so much.
You walk around headquarters these days, it's like a graveyard, right? I mean, the empty offices stretch for a ways. It's you guys have stripped down a lot at the administrative level.
Yeah, it's a ghost town, I think. And someone told me that when that building was built, it was built for 2,000 people, and which is hard to imagine that many people at a central office. But by the same token, we have a little over 400 individuals in that building now.
Right.
And so we do look, stay tuned, because we're looking at utilizing the building in a very different way, perhaps moving a school or two into the building so that they have access to that type of environment.
Final question for you here. Say you've got a family who's weighing the school decision, trying to figure out whether or not to send a child to a city school. What would you say to them? What sort of encouraging words, if any, would you offer them?
So the first thing I'll say is go meet with the school that is in their area and go talk to the leadership of that school. And what we're trying to, I talked about Chester Arthur earlier, Kim Newman. One of the things that Kim Newman is doing is meeting with many of the parents who don't even have children in the school yet and really beginning to focus on the types of learning environment that those parents would want to see for their children. And so I would encourage a family member who lives in Philadelphia in the neighborhood to go visit the neighborhood school, go talk with the principal, understand the principal's vision for that school, share with the principal what they would like to see in their child's neighborhood school. And many may be surprised about the type of leadership that is now in many of these schools that are welcoming that type of conversation. And so that's what I would suggest first. The second point is this whole notion of being involved and really getting involved, just not at the school level, but more micro level in elections, supporting individuals who are supporting public education. And I think that those things are extremely important.
Thanks so much, Dr. Hite. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth.